we need to position ourselves to be resilient, to be able to pivot to one market or to the next, whether it's a domestic market, whether it's an international market. You obviously have to be very strategic with your limited resources about where you're investing. But again, not just kind of making some kind of declaration that that we're going to be going in this direction and only this direction. That's really going to set us up for failure. And so I think having that resilience of our supply chain and being able to be more nimble and to pivot, that's going to serve us well in the future.
This is the Stein Seedcast. I'm your host, David Thompson. Join me as we visit with growers, agronomists, seed experts, and other industry professionals about seed, agronomy, and the business of farming. Hello, and welcome to the Stein Seedcast. I'm David Thompson, National Marketing and Sales Director for Stein Seed Company. Today, we welcome to the Seedcast Mike Steenhoek, who's the Executive Director of the Soy Transportation Coalition. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So in this episode, Mike's going to talk about the Soy Transportation Coalition and the work that they do to support America's farmers and things that farmers can do to help keep themselves efficient in transporting grain to market. So let's get started. Well, Mike, to get things started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Central Iowa. Both my parents grew up on farms, east of Des Moines. I actually went to the University of Iowa. Majored in political science, minor in Russian language, got an MBA from the University of Iowa. And then after college, I really went the public policy route. So I worked for Senator Chuck Grassley for 8 years, half of that time in Washington, D.C., half of that time in his Des Moines office. And then, an opportunity presented itself to work on behalf of farmers. The CEO of the Iowa Soybean Association, a gentleman by the name of Kirk Leeds, reached out to me and mentioned that a group of soybean farmer organizations, including the Iowa Soybean Association, had decided to create an entity focused on the supply chain that connects farmers from their ultimate consumption, their ultimate demand, whether it's domestic or international, and that whole supply chain aspect to it, and the need for farmers to be more engaged in it. And so the name of the organization was titled the Soy Transportation Coalition, and the question was, would I be interested in being the executive director of it? And that was in 2007. And so obviously, long story short, I've been doing that ever since. And so I work on behalf of this organization, on behalf of farmers, ways to enhance the supply chain that farmers depend upon.
So, as you said, the goal of the Soy Transportation Coalition is to connect the dots between the grain that's being harvested and getting it to market. Yeah,
I mean, one of the things it's easy, when you think back to Economics 101, you often just fixate on two things, supply and demand. And if both those things are healthy, you're going to have a profitable enterprise, a profitable industry. Well, there's a third element of that, and that is the connectivity between supply and demand. And that's what our multimodal transportation system does. And if you don't have a cost-effective, reliable, competitive transportation system, a resilient transportation system, supply and demand will just look at each other. The transaction will never occur. And so, hence the need to have a series of supply chain links, whether it's our rural roads and bridges to our highways and interstates, our freight rail system, our inland waterways with locks and dams, as well as our ports. If those aren't well capitalized, if those aren't well maintained, farmers will not be profitable. And there's particularly an acute understanding of this among soybean farmers, because when you look at the pie chart of where soybeans go, over half of that pie chart would be labeled international. When my dad grew up on a farm in Prairie City, Iowa, decades ago, so much of what was produced on the farm was consumed within a pretty close proximity to the farm. So yes, roads were important, bridges were important, but farming back then didn't really think about the significance of freight railroads, inland waterways, ports, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And so now, in the 21st century, when you've got over half of what soybeans farmers produce is exported, you can't just get supply right. You can't just get demand right. You have to also get transportation right. And that's really kind of the essence of what we do, is to try to find any opportunity to make that supply chain more cost effective, more reliable, more resilient, more competitive.
So as we're sitting here today, we're kind of in the midst of harvest 2025, and one thing I'm hearing about is, water levels on the Mississippi River, and talk a little bit, if you would, about how that impacts what you just talked about, the supply chain, and how it impacts growers.
Yeah, I mean, it's really been one of the secrets to our success. So other countries have navigable waterways, inland rivers where you can transport things commercially on it. What makes the United States so unique is that we've got this inland waterway system that penetrates into the most productive farm ground on the planet. So when you look at the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, the Illinois River, the Missouri River, the Arkansas River, that whole system penetrates into the real productive farm ground in the United States, where so much soybeans are produced, so much corn is produced, and other commodities. And so you've got this very efficient maritime highway that can connect farmers in the middle of the United States, hundreds of miles removed from our coastal regions, and it's able to effectively transport it to places like the lower Mississippi River near New Orleans, and then it's launched onto the international marketplace. So it's been one of the secrets to our success. So you have these farmers who are located in eastern Iowa that are very international entrepreneurs because they can easily tap into this Mississippi River, and it gets down to our export terminals. 55% of soybean exports typically leave from the collection of export terminals on the lower Mississippi River near New Orleans. It's by far our number one export region. And the Mississippi River is the reason why that's such a powerful place for us.
And as it relates to, obviously water levels go up, they go down, that has an impact on how quickly or how completely that market can be moved. Is that fair to say?
It dramatically changes the economics of barge transportation, and really in two ways. So when you have low water conditions on the river, you have a more shallow navigation channel. So you can't load as many bushels or tons per barge because you're concerned that it might scrape the bottom or it might ground. That's number one. Number two is the shipping channel becomes more narrow. So one of the reasons why barge transportation is so profound and so economical is this ability to attach numerous barges together,
right,
and then to form one single unit that you've got power in the back, a towboat that actually pushes it down the river, whether you have 15, 20, 30 barges all together. But when you have lower water conditions, the channel becomes more narrow. So it's kind of analogous from going from a 4-lane highway down to a 2-lane highway. And we all understand with traffic how exasperating that can be and how that can cause congestion. Same rule applies when it comes to the inland waterway system. So unfortunately, we're in year 4 consecutively of low water conditions on the Mississippi River, and it's inhibiting the economics of barge transportation, which is really frustrating. The previous 3 years, 2022, 2023, and 2024, it was more intuitive for us that we would have low water conditions on the river because we had pretty extensive drought conditions throughout the country. The drought map, if you watched it, coming out every Thursday, and it looked more and more angry with every Thursday.
Right.
Lots of ugly red and dark colors. This year in 2025, it was a bit more of a surprise and more head scratching because so much of the Midwest had robust precipitation in the spring through most of the summer. And it was really in the Mississippi River watershed, it was really the middle part of August when all of a sudden the spigots got turned off, and where we had really dry conditions persist for a number of weeks now. Now, the states east of the Mississippi River that feed into the Ohio River, they've had a more prolonged period of drought. So the Ohio River has been less swollen than it normally does. And, when the Ohio River meets up with the Mississippi River at Cairo, Illinois, a lot of the water at the lower part of the river is supplied by the Ohio River. So it's a really important conduit for that. But so it is kind of caught a lot of us off guard that we were expecting this would be a year we wouldn't have to
Right.
talk about low water conditions, but yet here we are once again. And it comes at a very inopportune time, because when you've got a lot of challenges that we're facing when it comes to the export market, which soybean farmers do, you want to make sure that your supply chain is not adding insult to injury to that. You want your supply chain to be reducing costs of moving product from point A to point B. You don't want to be adding costs.
Right.
And then when you have low water conditions on the river, it adds costs.
Okay. Let's talk about ports a little bit. Once you get down to port, you've talked about some of these there, and I think you've talked about the Port of Houston. Recently read an article you were talking about. I think Virginia has a port project that's ongoing. Talk about how those types of expansion of ports and maybe I'd call it modernizing of the port solutions create opportunities for those growers who are growing particularly corn and soybeans.
Well, one of the lessons that we've known for many years when it comes to supply chain, but it really became much more pronounced for us portrayed in more vivid terms and colors, was after the COVID pandemic, when all of a sudden we understood the significance of the supply chain and when things go awry. And one of the axioms when it comes to the supply chain is don't put all of your eggs in one basket. So the more you can spread your eggs across multiple baskets, the more resilient you are. So we will always be enthusiastic about the Mississippi Gulf and the Pacific Northwest, which is our number 2 export region. About 25% leave from the Pacific Northwest. But one of the things that we as an organization have really increased our focus on is to try to diversify that supply chain. So yes, pursue improvements with the Mississippi Gulf, and yes, the Pacific Northwest, but also places like the Texas Gulf at Houston. That's why if soybean farmers were down there a number of weeks ago presenting a $275,000 check to enhance some soybean meal export capacity at the Port of Houston. It's a way to help diversify our supply chain. And it also means the Atlantic coast, a project that we're working on related to at the Port of Portsmouth near Norfolk, Virginia. We also have a project underway at the Great Lakes at the Port of Milwaukee. So any way you can diversify your supply chain, spreading those eggs across multiple baskets, soybean farmers will be more resilient. And so that's one of the things that we're going to continue to be aggressively pursuing.
And what kind of things are they doing as it relates to making those ports more valuable for the what they're trying to do in terms of making it better for soybean exports, for example?
Yeah, some of the projects that we have really gravitated toward, and there's one at the Port of Grace Harbor in Aberdeen, Washington, and and of course the project at Port of Houston, the one at Milwaukee. One of the common denominators with those is they're enhancing the infrastructure to accommodate the export of soybean meal. And of course, one of the big developments within the soybean industry is this proliferation of new processing capacity that's already online, but some that's still yet to come. And obviously the motivating factor of that is to produce more soybean oil to help satisfy and achieve some of these very aggressive renewable fuels and sustainability goals that we have as a country. So if you're processing more soybeans to achieve more soybean oil, that means there is going to be a significant amount of soybean meal that will obviously feed into the domestic market with livestock, but then also it needs to be exported as well. And so we need additional infrastructure capacity to be able to achieve that. And so that's one of the things that we've done with providing some funding for some of these projects and partnering with a number of companies they're the ones that are actually building it. But it's a way for soybean farmers to actually put their money where their mouth is. And one of the things that farmers really appreciate is that they want to invest their checkoff dollars into things that are real. They don't want to invest money into something where they have to later guess, did they make a difference? Did they help improve the profitability of their fellow soybean farmers? With these particular projects, these farmers can go to these facilities and they can see that now there is new loading capacity to move soybean meal onto a ship. They see more storage capacity to handle more soybean meal. They can see that this link in the supply chain is more robust. It is more cost effective. It is more resilient. And we played a role in that. And so soybean farmers have really gravitated toward those projects. It's always a good opportunity to do those kind of projects, but it's particularly a good opportunity given some of the real headwinds the soybean industry is facing right now.
And I would assume that that's also a positive outcome in the sense that instead of your focus on exporting of whole soybeans, we're talking about value added. You're processing more soybeans here locally, and you're upgrading ports to be able to take advantage of that part of the equation that helps, ultimately should help growers as well.
Yeah, I mean, we will always be enthusiastic and aggressively pursue the export of additional whole soybeans. But, one of the axioms that has persisted within the soybean world for many years is that it's better to export meat than meal. It's better to export meal than whole soybeans, because when you do so, you're exporting the higher value commodity. That means more of the economic value of what we're selling is closer and closer to the farmer, and that's something that we absolutely want to continue to be pursuing. So, we have kind of an all of the above kind of strategy, but by all means, when we see this additional growth in soybean processing, it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to really export that higher value commodity soybean meal to a variety of customers.
Yeah. So we've spent some time talking about exports, and I want to maybe dial back and we'll kind of zone in more locally. Growing up in the rural part of the country, I recognize rural roads and bridges are of paramount importance to farmers, and it sounds like you guys do some work in that arena as well. So whether it's county bridges, gravel roads, secondary roads, I guess what kind of things are on your plate working with to try to make sure farmers have adequate road conditions to get crop to market?
Yeah, and so we're very enthusiastic about these other modes of transportation and other links in the supply chain, like rail, like inland waterway, like ports. But we will always have a real soft spot in our heart and a real focus on that initial link in the supply chain, which is our rural roads and bridges. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter the condition of our freight railroads or the condition of our inland waterways if we don't have a quality inventory of rural roads and bridges, because the transaction will never occur. That's the first link in the journey, are these rural roads and bridges. The challenge, of course, is this infrastructure is very expensive to maintain and improve. The trend line continues to be that farmers are producing more, and that's a good thing. The equipment to be able to accommodate it naturally has grown as well. So there is more. It does tax the system more. We're having to transport more bushels of soybeans, more bushels of corn than that local system had to accommodate decades ago. And obviously the equipment is different as well. But it really kind of helps explain that there's a real friction point between the two, because I don't know a lot of counties where their bank account for being able to support and improve this rural infrastructure is growing. Most rural counties, their funding availability, from whether it's from federal sources, state sources, or local sources, is either stagnant or on the decline. One rural short span bridge can easily cost $250,000, $500,000, $800,000, $1 million. And I just don't, and we're not talking about the Golden Gate Bridge. We're talking about a rural short span bridge that's not sexy, very pedestrian. But yet it's really integral to the supply chain for farmers. And so one of the things that we routinely talk about, persistently talk about, is that our crystal ball suggests that there will not be sufficient funding coming from the federal government, the state government, or local government to fully and completely satisfy all our rural road and bridge needs. So we better focus not just on asking for more money, we also need to focus on the cost side of the equation. How can you actually make the existing taxpayer dollars stretch further get more bang for your buck. And so one of the initiatives that we really continue to work on is promoting more cost-effective ways of replacing and repairing rural bridges. So we've partnered with counties, we've worked with engineers to highlight some of these innovative approaches. So replacing a rural bridge, there was a project that we partnered with in 2024 with a county in Northeast Iowa, Buchanan County, where the county engineer replaced a bridge that was about 135 feet in length. So it's a pretty long bridge, but farmers utilize it. It cost $300,000 to replace that bridge. Traditional methods, prevailing methods of replacing it would have cost him easily $900,000. So you had a $600,000 cost savings for one bridge. And I don't know a single county that wouldn't benefit profoundly from that kind of cost savings. So that's one of the things that we really have an opportunity with as a farmer-funded, farmer-led organization to really help promote these cost-saving measures. And I think farmers are arguably the most effective messengers for that, because you think about a farmer, when they encounter some kind of challenge or difficulty on the farm, some dilemma that they have to surmount, their default reaction is not a successful farmer. Their default reaction is not, you know what, I'm going to get out my credit card and spend my way out of this problem. Their default position for successful farmers is, how can I be innovative and actually solve this problem without breaking the bank?
Yeah.
How can I make my existing dollars stretch further? So if that mentality works so well on the farm, clearly it should work well when it comes to maintaining and improving our county infrastructure. So that's something that we're certainly going to continue to work on. And we talk a lot about in this country about government efficiency. And that can be achieved in a lot of different areas. But I would argue that one of the most effective ways of doing that is promoting more innovative approaches when it comes to our infrastructure, including our rural infrastructure.
Are there things that farmers can do locally? Because as you said, I think at the state and county level, there's no shortage of uses for the money, and there's no shortage of people asking for things to be made better. What can or should farmers be doing at the local level to try to keep the focus on county roads and bridges and secondary roads, as it were?
Yeah, and I think farmers can be a real effective messenger for this. Not only sometimes they're elected members of the county commission. They often know who's on it. We recently had a farmer who is on the Soy Transportation Coalition board from Kansas that really took it upon himself to engage with his county leadership about, there was a particular bridge that had been closed for a considerable period of time. The county budget was very constricted in its ability to replace it. But we had this report that the Soy Transportation Coalition issued called the Top 20 Innovations for Rural Bridge Replacement and Repair that highlighted some of these cost savings approaches. And we had an agreement with the county that if they use one of these innovative approaches that's going to replace that bridge for a fraction of the cost, soybean farmers would actually provide some funding to help underwrite some of the pre-engineering and design costs of that. So it really helped kind of get that county off its dime and to really be open to new innovative approaches. Now, if you go to that county, you'll be able to drive over that bridge. So it's a real example of farmers not just shaking their fists and being exasperated about why the county's not doing a better job of maintaining the rural infrastructure. It's farmers saying, no, we're going to be part of the solution as well. And we're even willing to put some funding into it to help provide a win-win scenario, not only for us farmers, but also for the county as well.
So it sounds to me like there's a lot of things happening in the transportation side of the equation here. But if you look ahead over the next, let's just say 5 years, is there one thing that you can think of that would really make a huge impact in efficiency or helping improve growers' situation as it relates to transportation? And that could be policy or infrastructure or new technology or whatever. What's on the wish list?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you can broadly put it under the umbrella of resiliency. And just again, back to that, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. There's the old axiom that's attributed to Wayne Gretzky, in which he said, "I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going." And in this day and age, with agriculture and a lot of other industries, but particularly with agriculture, it's hard to know where the puck is going. It's hard to know what international markets will be on the rise and which ones will be on the decline. We have some guesses. We can kind of make some kind of forecast, but there's a lot of uncertainty right now when it comes to agriculture. So what that means is we need to position ourselves to be resilient, to be able to pivot to one market or to the next, whether it's a domestic market, whether it's an international market. You obviously have to be very strategic with your limited resources about where you're investing. But again, not just kind of making some kind of declaration that that we're going to be going in this direction and only this direction. That's really going to set us up for failure. And so I think having that resilience of our supply chain and being able to be more nimble and to pivot, that's going to serve us well in the future.
Farmers, what they're facing today, economy is tight. Any advice you can give them on how do you make sure that what you're doing from a freight and logistics standpoint is going to be as efficient as it can be and keep you as profitable as you can be given the conditions we're in?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, certainly an increase in proliferation of farmers having more storage on the farm for a number of years, but part of that is inspired by some of our supply chain challenges. You're seeing, farmers that are located close to the Mississippi River that, for many years, their routine was they harvest from the field, they truck it to the river terminal, and then they say goodbye to it, whether it's their soybeans or their corn. And now you have low water conditions that are continuing to persist, this need to have more on-farm storage so that you are more resilient to some of these supply chain disruptions. That's certainly going to serve you well. Really being open to other markets. When you have a challenge with the export market, can you pivot to more of a domestic livestock movement? Mm-hmm. That may not be your option A, but that may be an option B. And it's farmers who have an option A, option B, and option C are better positioned for success than a farmer who just has an option A. And so storage can be certainly a part of that. I also think, farmers, they've made a lot of progress in this area over the years, but it's still, you encounter this among farmers that they don't really see. It's easy to chase, for your delivery option it's easy to chase price. What has the highest per bushel bid for your soybeans or for your corn? And one of the things that I think we've worked really hard at, and we've created a calculator that actually helps farmers make these decisions, is take into consideration the actual time it takes you to deliver to that location. Is it, sometimes it's more profitable to chase after a 10 cent premium if it's 40 miles away versus something that's 10 cents less, that's the local elevator. Sometimes it's not, but you have to take those things into consideration. Transportation, when it comes to agriculture and other industries, it's important to remember that it's a cost. It's a cost barrier between supply and demand. And the lower that number is, that's going to facilitate your profitability as a farmer. The higher that number is, whether it's truck, whether it's rail, whether it's barge, whether it's ocean, the higher that number is, it's going to be an impediment to your profitability. So we talk a lot about, within the Soy Transportation Coalition, is we want to promote subtraction math, not addition math. How can we remove cents per bushel on that delivered cost? Attacking all of those those modes of transportation. How do you attack that trucking number? How do you attack that rail number, the barge number, the ocean vessel number, to remove cents per bushel? When all of a sudden you make things more costly and you have addition math, that's going to be a barrier for farmer profitability, and that's obviously what we want to avoid at all costs.
But it sounds like a transportation standpoint, it's the old adage, there's no home runs. It's about making good base hits and just kind of incremental gains as you go along and just doing the best you can.
Yeah, I mean, some of these infrastructure projects that we've been a part of, I mean, they've got a bigger ripple effect. So we worked with the state of Louisiana and the Army Corps of Engineers a few years ago on a project to help deepen the lower Mississippi River. And we actually, soybean farmers contributed $2 million toward that project. And what that does is that by having that additional 5 feet of water depth, you can put 500,000 additional bushels of soybeans in an ocean vessel, going from, say, 2.1 million bushels of soybeans to 2.6 million bushels of soybeans. Well, that has a pretty significant impact on the economics of that delivery. So certainly those are real opportunities we want to pursue, but we also don't want to lose sight of the fact that so much of it resides with and is retained on the condition of our local roads and bridges, our rural roads and bridges, and how do you make those more cost effective? The example I used in Kansas, that's going to have more of a limited parochial local impact, sure, but we need to see that replicated. And so we want to really kind of have that holistic view of that entire supply chain and ways to make it better.
Well, Mike, as we're finishing out our conversation today, I've got a set here of some rapid-fire questions that I kind of want to toss at you, and just kind of give me your quick answer back as we finish up here. So, first thing is, one thing every grower should watch for during harvest and look for to spot transportation trouble early on.
Yeah, I think low water conditions on the Mississippi River, that's clearly one. Even if you're not in an area that feeds into the river, because everything is so inextricably linked, if you have a deficiency in one area of the country, it's going to percolate and manifest itself in your neighborhood as well. So that's important to be watching for.
What do you think's the one most common mistake that a farmer may make when it comes to shipping or logistics of grain?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of have this understanding that once I make the delivery at the elevator or at the processing facility, any subsequent transportation issues, that's their problem. That's the company's problem. That's the elevator's problem. Actually, one of the things that we see is that when that system becomes more costly, whether it's rail rates or barge transportation becomes more expensive, those costs get disproportionately rolled back onto the farmer in the form of a lower price or a more negative basis. So these transportation issues, even if you're not at the steering wheel, farmer, they impact your wallet, and so it merits your attention.
Bottleneck, yeah. So what's one project or improvement that you're most proud of that the Soy Transportation Coalition has done?
Yeah, I'm very, very pleased that we were able to partner with the Port of Grays Harbor in Aberdeen, Washington. The company AGP is expanding their soybean meal export capacity there, going from 3 million metric tons to 6 million metric tons. And soybean farmers contributed $1.3 million toward that project, which was beneficial to the port. But then what it actually also helped do is that it served as a catalyst for the Federal Maritime Administration to actually provide a $25.5 million contribution to that. And so one of the things that soybean farmers really want to focus on is how can we use our checkoff dollars to help be a catalyst and leverage additional funding. Right. And so this was just a great example of not only making a meaningful contribution to an infrastructure project that'll be healthy for our industry, but it ended up being a catalyst for additional funding as well.
Is there a common or a myth that about soy transportation that you wish that farmers and everyone would stop believing?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to this. This is something that has a real impact on you farmers. It's not Cargill's problem. It's not Bunge's problem. It's not Louis Dreyfus's problem. Right. It's not the local elevator's problem. Yes, they deal with it as well, but ultimately it's you, the farmer, who are actually being disproportionately affected by any of these transportation challenges.
So do you have one word that would describe the state of U.S. agricultural transportation today?
I think the word is fragile. I wish that wasn't the case, but we've got some real challenges on this system is very expensive. Whether it's the inland waterway system with locks and dams, whether it's roads and bridges, whether it's freight rail, whether it's ports. And my crystal ball isn't perfect, but what it suggests is I don't see the federal government, state government, and local government having this windfall of money to be able to write a big enough check to meet all of these needs. And so there is some real fragility to that system, which makes us all the more focused on we need to also find ways to make it more cost effective as well. We can't, if we're just going to pin all of our hopes on government coming in, riding in on a white horse and writing a big check for us, we're going to be a very disappointed group of people. So we better find other ways and innovative ways to do more with less to get more bang for our buck.
That's great feedback, Mike. And again, for us as a seed company, we're focused on the front end of things, trying to create products that bring more value to growers, but recognizing that chain has to go all the way out to the end user. So certainly have enjoyed having you on the show, enjoyed your feedback and learning more about what you and the Soy Transportation Coalition is doing to support soybean growers throughout the United States. So thanks for your time.
That's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.